What is up? Welcome to this episode of Lambgoat's Vanflip podcast. Today I'm joined by Domenic Romeo. God,
Almost.
almost. Almost got through it.
A for
Domenic.
effort.
Yeah. Do you go by Dom or Domenic?
It doesn't matter. Whatever you prefer is okay with me.
Cool. I'm just going to use short form because Dom is easier than Domenic.
You won't sound like my mom. It's good. Okay.
It won't be, we won't be super formal on this podcast. How about that?
Mhm.
Well, anyway, Dom has done a list of things. He's got a pretty interesting story. You got a pretty interesting story. We'll get into that. But most currently, you're playing guitar in a band called In Rain, and you guys have an album coming out on the 14th of July through Relapse Records. The title of that album is "The Way of All Flesh Is Decay." And that's basically why you're on here today. But we're going to briefly talk about that right now. But I want to get into some other things about your past and what you've done in the last couple of decades. So yeah,
Sure.
in rain is kind of like this weird pseudo super group for like hardcore. So how did that all come together?
It kind of came about as a pandemic project. I had an idea, a lot of time on my hands, and going through a very difficult stretch, as I'm sure a lot of people were. And I had this idea. I was bored. I was writing songs every day. I watched a lot of kids videos because it's my favorite band. Kids videos, and there's something Gene Simmons said once about how he writes a song every day, even if it sucks. And I'll leave the ratio up to in the eye of the beholder of what that would entail. But I thought that was a cool idea, and I started writing a song every day. And the idea was to take the most interesting ones and send them to different people that I'm friends with, and just do them remotely, send them back and forth, and at the end just dub a bunch of like Maxell cassettes, like an old mixtape, so like in the '80s we would make each other tapes of all like stuff that we thought was the coolest, and have like a handwritten cover, or you draw some artwork and list the songs, whatever. And that was kind of like my idea. That's how it started. And about 4 or 5 songs into that, I sent Mike what was House of Thieves on the record. That Cro-Mags record had just come out, that newish one, In the Beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love anything that has Harley Flanagan and Rocky George on it. Count me in. Great duo in my opinion. And I was really excited about it, but I kind of wished it sounded more like Best Wishes when it came out. And I was like, you know what? Me and Mike were just kind of talking. I'm like, what if we were in charge, if we ruled the world, what would this record have sounded like? And that's how House of Thieves came together. We're like, let's write a song that sounds like Best Wishes. You know what I mean? Like that we thought would be cool. And we bounced it back and forth. Mike didn't really know how to use a recording interface at the time, so he just yelled into a pair of headphones. This was on the demo version of it. But, it came out awesome. It was really intense. I think Harley would approve.
Yeah.
We just kind of went from there. We're like, let's do more songs. And that's when the mixtape kind of got off the rails. And the 4 or 5 songs I had started, each spiraled off into their own band. So and Rain ended up becoming its own whole different thing. So we did a bunch of songs, and we worked on that for about a year. To my concept of time is shot, with
Yeah,
stuff.
for sure.
I don't know, up from down most of the time, but so that was the idea. We were just kind of bouncing stuff back and forth, and then when I decided it was going to become a real thing, that we're going to go into the studio and record it, I had set a few rules for myself because as a songwriter, I've always been a person that I take like a cinematic movie approach to when I make a record. There's like a definitive start, there's a definitive end to the record, and then I kind of fill the space in between with what if it was a movie, what the story would be. It's a lot more like, it's a totally different approach than what I did with N Rain. With N Rain, I totally went AC/DC and just tried to go straight verse chorus with everything. I wanted to challenge myself to do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big point of contention to make sure all the songs had verses, choruses, and were kind of structured in that classic format. And I think it did a great service in the end. But so with that in mind, we decided we're going to record at a place we never recorded before. That was my other rule, and that's when we decided to go to Len in New Jersey. He does Carmichael. He does Landmine Studios. It's out in Ewing. And Len's always just been here to help with like integrity stuff and pulling teeth stuff, like random little things I had to do in a pinch. He's always been there, and I'm like, you know what? I really like working with this guy. It'd be cool to like go all in and try to do something together and see how it came out. And he was awesome. He was amazing, real patient because we're all like really ADHD, million things going on, old dudes that live all over the country. So it's like he was able to keep it all together for us, which was really cool. And then that takes us to the band guys, which was the drummer was Adam Jarvis, who I worked together for years. We used to work at Guitar Center, like in the, the early to mid 2000s. Me, him, Mitch from Neolithic and Pulling Teeth.
Well, Adam's in Pig Destroyer and Misery Index too, correct?
Yeah, and Scour and Lockup. He's like in every band. This is like when Pulling Teeth and Ruiner and like Misery Index were kind of like newish bands. I think Netherton and Sparky had just left Dying Fetus and started out. It was like it was like the early version of all. And we'd always be like, it'd be cool to start a band sometime. That was a great place to work. There's a lot of wild stories from there, that era.
Share one. Really let's go. Let's get one. Let's get like an old school working at the music store story between you and Adam.
I mean, we used to just like, all right. So on the first day, I worked there, and keep in mind, Mitch is like my little brother. He was Pulling Teeth with me. He's like one of my best friends. So he gets me a job there because I needed something to do between tour. It was like we're young dudes, don't really care. It's not really career driven. We just need a paycheck and health insurance, and we get there on my first day, and he introduces me to our boss, and makes some smart ass comment like, he's here, have him go clean the bathrooms. And they're like joshing and ribbing and doing whatever the dudes do, and I'm like, yeah, and decided I was going to go into the bathroom and fill a rubber glove up with water, thinking that would have the same effect that a water balloon would have.
Yeah.
If you were to water balloon at someone, get soaked and it's all good. But what I didn't know that a rubber glove is a different consistency and doesn't really work that way. So I went back and I'm like, bathroom's all clean. And then Mitch was like, you should do this next. And him and my boss are laughing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's really funny. And I drove back and, took a big swing at Mitch with this rubber glove, thinking it's going to just soak him in front of everyone. Everyone's going to laugh. But what ended up happening was the hand just got bigger, 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 and bigger, and just knocked Mitch across the room into the wall. This was my first day working there. First day my boss has ever met me. And the whole reaction was just like,
yeah,
just kind of like, who is this guy? Why do we hire him?
Thin ice already.
And from there it was just all out war. It was just like fake ads for different bands with Mitch's phone number. Mitch was usually like my target most of the time. I tried mailing him to another store once. It was a fun place to work. I don't think we got much actual work done.
Interesting.
But anyways, going
back to the lineups. You have Mitch, Adam.
Yeah. Jarvis was, I texted him. I'm like, hey, would you want to do these songs with me? I'm bored. I'm stuck in my house. I don't know what to do. And he's like, dude, I live down the street from you. He literally lived a block away from me at the time, and I had no idea because we hadn't talked in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started getting together and hammering them out, which was great, easy. He's a pro, And so the original plan was it was just going to be me and Jarvis recording all the music. I was going to do all the guitar and bass. That's what I did in Integrity most of the time during my tenure with them. And that was it. And then, a week before, I'm like, whoa, I already got Jarvis. I already got my score. If I could have anyone in the world play bass, who would it be? And I thought about it. I was too afraid to ask Harley. But I decided, one of the greatest bass players, in my opinion, and most interesting musicians, most coolest bands from my favorite era of music, which, is that 90s section of hardcore, was Art Legere from Bloodlet.
Mm-hmm.
And I hit him up and asked him if he would want to do it, and he was kind of iffy on it. And it was around that time Bloodlet and him parted ways. Bloodlet ended up reconfiguring their lineup. They needed guys that can actually go out and play.
Yeah.
Art's like recluse, he doesn't leave the house much, and the guitar player had moved, so they were in the middle of a shift of members and whatnot. And I was like, what's going to really make those guys really get their goat? You know what I mean? You should come do this record.
Yeah.
But
some fuel to the flame there.
Yeah, I had to lure him with a touch of evil. Oh, speaking of which, are you familiar with the Judas Priest song, "A Touch of Evil"?
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered, is it like a touch of evil, or is it like a recipe? Is it like a touch of evil? Is he adding a touch of evil?
I think it's probably a touch of evil, like a recipe, right?
I like to think that he's in the kitchen, not evil enough. Calls for
a little touch,
touch of evil,
just a dash,
Yeah, just pinch. These are the things that I think about.
Yeah, no,
But
I get
anyways,
it. ADHD, I understand, man.
coming back. So yeah, Art was like, was all aboard. He learned all the songs in about a week. Came out and knocked everything out like a total pro. Me, him, and Jarvis went up to Jersey. We stayed about 4 days in this weird farmhouse that was in Pennsylvania, just outside of Ewing, and we just lived. We just lived in the studio for like 4 days and knocked everything out. And the remaining period of time was, we all work full time, have kids. I mean, most of us have kids, but we were never able to all be there at the same time. So it would be something where I would drive up, do a bunch of guitar stuff, and then Score would drive up and do a bunch of vocals, and we'd always crisscross and never really catch each other until the end. We were able to get together once and hammer out all the little bugs and stuff that needed to be done. And then it came time for solos, and I was like, started doing, my thing. I'm an okay guitar player when it's like doing Dom stuff, you know what I mean? I'm
Right.
but I'm not like, great by any means on the grand spectrum of things. And there's a lot of stuff I wanted to do that I'm not really physically capable of. And that song Chasing Divinity was the perfect example. So I'm like, man, I really gotta get someone that can do what I have in my head here. Who am I gonna ask? And Sebastian Phillips from Noisem and Exhumed came up because he's an old friend.
Yep.
He's a little kid. He's a musical prodigy, And I didn't even tell him what to do. I just sent him the song. And I go, tell me what you think. And what he sent back was so good that I fell out of my seat laughing. It was it was too perfect. It was exactly what I had in my head. And I was like, you have to join this band. I'll wipe out half of my solos and give you half of the space, the real estate, do whatever you want. And everything he sent was amazing. You know what I mean? It was a perfect fit. So that's kind of how the story of how the band came together. If you like our bands, you might think that's a cool story. If you don't know our bands, it's probably going to suck. But, it's for someone like me that likes all the bands that everybody was in, I think it's pretty cool. And maybe,
yeah, of course.
Maybe there's someone else out there too,
Of course. And is this project something that you're gonna one day play live? Because you were saying Art's kind of like a recluse and this, that, the other, and everyone lives separately and does other things outside of this project. But do you think one day you'll be playing live shows, or is that in the near future?
We made a rule. It's like a pact when we did this that there's gonna be no scabs ever. So it was either 5 of us or we're not gonna do it.
Right.
Which also raised the bar really high as far as availability goes, because it's never available at the same time. So it's kind of open-ended. You know what I mean? If it works out, I would love it. There's nothing I would love more than to do it. But at the same time, I liked SOD a lot more when they didn't play shows either. So it's I'd rather keep an air of mystery to it.
Kind of sounds, kind of sounds like it's either that or just some festival appearances here or there.
It's worked out the opposite, because I feel like, and I think this has crossed over from regular society as well. It's just work harder, work more, which is all fine and good, but then it's ended up being this huge homogenous pool of endless availability. You know what I mean? There's nothing that's just out of reach that's always going to be out of reach.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm probably 1 of 3 people that would care that it's out of reach. It's so part of that is alluring to me, and I think that would be cool. But you know what? If the right opportunity comes along and the stars align and we're all available, sure, I would love that. Playing with those guys was a blast.
Interesting. So how does that? My next question was, how did you kind of link up with Relapse? Because you guys released some singles last February, and then later in the year, August, September timeframe, or in the fall or whatever, you guys announced, or Relapse announced that you guys were signed to them. Well, how does that play into how does playing live play into that deal, or were they aware of that prior to?
Well, they're aware going in. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just it's a very I don't want to call it low maintenance in the sense that it's cheaping it, but as far as low maintenance guys and expectations go, that's us. You know what I mean? We just were happy to have somebody put it out and get it out there and get it to as many people as possible. And also, Relapse and Translation Lost have their hands in a lot of our previous bands, so they're kind of built in. And what I have going on with A389 and with Integrity at times is it's all the hands are in the right pie, so to speak.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was going to ask, is obviously we were going to get into it, but you are A389 as well. So, you have at your disposal the ability to put the record out as well. So that was one of my other questions, was as to why, go with Relapse when you could put it out yourself, or what was the thought process on that? But,
just no time to break a new band, honestly. It's I took a break. I think I ended the label formally I don't remember if it was 2014 or 16. It's like I said, time's a blur. I'm getting old, but yeah, it must have been like 15 or 16. 'Cause I had joined Integ at the time. I was like, you know, I can only put I have three kids. They're young, and it was like I can only put my eggs in one basket right now.
Mm-hmm.
And integrity is just as much as playing music and going out. It's not really. When I was doing A389 at its peak, I would work an 8-hour job, come home and eat dinner, put my kids to bed, and then I would go to the warehouse and pack orders until 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes all night, and then just go back to my other job. It was an insane time. That was like peak, like 2011 to 14. That was like full of hell and like nothing.
Yeah.
Those records, those first band's records were coming out. First, yeah, whatever. Anyways, yeah, but so it was a very physically and mentally taxing endeavor. And when I came back to do the Coldest Life reissues a couple years ago, the idea was that it was just going to be that. It's just like stuff that I could work on the layout, get the audio. It's stuff that I could just do at my own pace, and it's not. No one's waiting on it.
Mm-hmm.
It could be ready when it's ready. And I think that's been really appealing. So, but what I was getting at was during that window, I was absent from releasing records. Like a lot changed, and adding COVID, a lot more changed, and like things move incredibly fast. And dropping a new band out there is literally like dropping a paperclip into the ocean. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And then it's gone. And maintaining that sort of presence is just not something I'm able to do, given the life that I live outside of music. And thankfully, with Relapse Muscle, hopefully it's drop a paperclip into like a pond or like a reservoir, something a little less daunting.
Well, they're getting the PRs out there, so you know what I mean.
Yeah, they do a great job. I'm totally appreciative of everything.
Yeah, they're on top of it. Well, yeah, the record comes out in a month from today, actually, because it's the 14th today. So, July 14th, which is I guess 4 weeks from now. So you're listening to this a month after.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, go pick up the go pick up the album, or if you already have pre-ordered it, it's probably already at your doorstep sometime this week. But yeah, I kind of wanted to get into some other things outside of In Rain, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, whatever you want.
Yeah, I wanted to start out with the A389 label stuff.
Sure.
Did that come first, or were you in bands and doing music first?
Oh my, no, I was doing bands way before that. I've been doing bands since the early '90s, and A389 didn't come about till 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So my lineage is a little scattered. I grew up in Toronto. I mean, I can do a quick recap if you want.
Yeah, just go ahead, because some of the listeners aren't going to be aware of it in general. So
yeah, growing up in Toronto in the '90s and doing bands, things they were just bands I kicked around with my friends until we had a band called Dirge in the mid '90s, and we would play around quite a bit. That's when I got a taste for touring, and we played with bands like we were like a local band. We had a CD and a demo at the time, and we do stuff. We played with like bands that were smaller at the time, like Cryptopsy or Cataclysm, or like younger Canadian bands.
Small at the time, yeah. Small at the time.
That's what was our world at the time. And
right,
it was awesome.
I know.
And what happened was on the road, Dirge had gotten into a bad accident in Quebec. Actually, I think it was after that Cryptopsy show, or one of those French bands. I can't remember. I'm sorry, I got them confused. Forgive me. But we ended up having to take some time off because we rolled our van, and our drummer lost one of his fingers, and it was a catastrophe. It was a big deal. And we took some time off to regroup, and we came back. We started the band Day of Mourning, which pretty much became, my most prolific era in my time that I lived in Canada. And we played a lot with Day of Mourning. We toured Canada, we toured the U.S., we did a ton of all over the place. It was amazing. But never made it to do a full U.S. or Europe tour, which is kind of where things kind of got stagnant. And of all people, I took an ad out. It was Brick to Life that took an ad out for. It wasn't 25 to Life though. It was Coming Correct. And keep in mind, this is a different time and a different Rick.
Yeah.
How different? I'll leave that up to you. But it's a different time. And I took up the offer to go to Europe with him because I always wanted to go to Europe. So packed up all my shit. I had $300. I had a backpack full of clothes and my guitar, and that was it. It's my name, and I just got on a Greyhound and hauled ass to Baltimore. And Yeah, I did that Europe tour with them and did a few shows before I was like, this isn't for me. But
Did
it
you
was
last the whole tour? Did you get the whole tour done at least?
oh yeah, of course. If I commit, I commit.
How crazy? I mean, it had to have been crazy just to be out there with Rick.
It's, it's
I'm sure there's a lot of
I gotta
not safe for
differentiate.
work. I'm sure there's a lot of NSFW conversation or stories from that
Kind
time
of, but
frame.
it's not the same guy that he is now. You know what I
No,
mean?
of
It's just
course.
a different time, and it was a lot more. I like to think that it was a lot more innocent. It was hilarious. It was hilarious at all times. There's a lot of like classic Rick moments. But
Yeah.
like there's like I used to live in his he used to live in this apartment above a liquor store in I guess it's a neighborhood called Overly in Baltimore. I drive by it all the time with my kids. I'm like, that's the first place I lived when I moved here. But so he had this whole reign of it was this whole top of the building, which was like 2 floors full of like, the dude was like had a collection to end all collections. So the whole house just kind of like stored all his stuff, right?
Mhm.
And me kind of being, we were friendly, but I was still a stranger living in this guy's house on his couch to protect his stuff. He was like, I was kind of like delegated to one part of the apartment, which was like when you come through the back door, there was like a little living room with a kitchen, and then there was a door to the rest of the apartment, and that was it, right? So I was like, I had this little room with a kitchen and a way out, and if I got out and he wasn't home, I wasn't getting back in. I was
Uh,
sleeping on the pavement, and I had moved here and I didn't know anybody, and it was just kind of like, it was a wild time. But
how old
I
are you
mean,
around this time?
pardon me.
How old were you around this time?
Oh, geez, I would have been in my early to mid 20s.
Okay.
And like all I was like, you know what? It's a chance. I like 25. Everyone loved 25 at the time, But
God, it must have been wild coming from Toronto to Baltimore, though.
it was it was
Like
wild.
in general, culture shock. And what
I'll
year?
never.
What year is this again? What years?
What's funny is this was right after 9/11. This was maybe
Okay.
like a week or two after 9/11.
Wow.
So aside from the culture shock, America was in full force with like the full patriotic swing that came after
Right. Right.
9/11.
Right. Right.
I remember distinguishedly too. Distinctively. Forgive me. I mumble sometimes. But 2 things I remember that were like, what the fuck moments for me was freedom fries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember there was like something where the French refused to participate. There was like they had some beef. They were just like, all right, fuck
Yeah.
you, we're
So all the
taking
people that were going to McDonald's were like, "I
yeah,
want freedom
all freedom
fries."
fries. And then seeing a TV show where they interviewed Scott Ian from Anthrax about Anthrax,
Like the drug, not the
like
band.
feeling letters
Yeah.
with Anthrax.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I don't know. It's kind of fucked up. He didn't really have anything to say, right? So I'm just like, what am I doing here? It was like, it was wild. I'm like living on this dude's couch. Don't have a bathroom. I would have to go to Dunkin' Donuts to brush my teeth
Oh
in the
wow.
morning and stuff. And if he wasn't awake, I wasn't getting back in. So I had to bring my stuff with me and be ready to just like, hightail it and do what I was gonna do for the day. But during that time, I made friends with Scott and Dougie that I ended up starting the band Slumlords with after that.
Hmm.
And by then, I was a little more established. No, I'm sorry. There was a little gap in between there, if I'm going to be thorough, where the guys from Next Step Up were like Baltimore legends. They have this other band called Wake Up Cold. If you're local, you would know. I'm not sure how far outside of the reach that they really got. Aside from Europe, because I did go to Europe with them too, I ended up becoming a band where they would just go to Europe with bands as a hired gun.
There you
So
go.
Wake Up Cold after that. Then I came back. I was like, I need to start my own thing, and that's when we started Slumlords. And we got Jeff Perlin from Breakdown, who happened to be living in Baltimore. I saw him at a show, and I was like, "You live in Baltimore?" I was like starstruck because I love Breakdown. Right? It was kind of
Nice.
cool for me. I mean, starstruck as you would be finding,
In the
sugar
hardcore
break.
world. Yeah, in the hardcore world.
But it was cool. And so we did that, and Slumlords, had a lot of great opportunities. We had to go to Europe. We toured. We kind of were like the first band around here that would like kind of only do fests because we were one of the first bands to pull the old guy card. So
Hmm.
people wanted us to play. We had a record on Locking Out, and we were able to do bullshit like Posse Numbers or Sync with Cali or whatever. And that was a great time. We got to do a lot of cool stuff, but with minimal amount of movement. Reach a lot with moving little. But as that was winding down, I kind of started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And Pulling Teeth came after that.
Mm-hmm.
And Pulling Teeth was a band that went from 2005 to 2012. It's probably like my favorite band that I've been in. That was my baby. We started that from the ground up. We had started Pulling Teeth with the idea. We were still all pretty young, and we wanted a band. If I wanted to make a band, much like End Rain, I created Pulling Teeth out of the idea of picking the best guys from all the local bands.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
the guys
yeah.
had the same work ethic as I did, that we would get shit done. Because Pulling Teeth at its peak, like 10-inch Vicious Skin era Pulling Teeth would play like 3 shows in one night. If we're playing New York and there was a show in Brooklyn we could play that night and another show in a warehouse, we were there. We do all
Nice.
three.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, yeah.
So, we was not sleep and just do it. So the work ethic at the early era, the first half of Pulling Teeth was like sight to behold. It was awesome, and we did a lot of that. And I should mention that since Pulling Teeth started in '05, '04 is when A389 started. See, there's going to be some cross pollination. And '04, I started A389 because Slumlords was playing those fests, like I mentioned, like in California and in Wilkes-Barre. And I thought it would be a cool opportunity to get other bands out there that were in the same boat as us. I called it old guy bands. And we'd have bands that were like Everyday Dollars, which was like dudes that were in Killing Time and Uprise and Dark Side NYC, which is one of my favorites. That was the reason I was interested, because I love Dark Side, I love Rich. So we did Everyday Dollars, 7-inch, and Bring It On with a local band. And we, Early Wisdom in Chains was another one. It was just more just like, like older guy band stuff that we were using our leverage out there to help these other guys get on people's radar. But as Pulling Teeth the tide shifted and Pulling Teeth came into the foreground, so did A389's direction, and it became, kind of like a metallic hardcore. It became what A389 is known for. Like those early years were like hardcore stuff, and then it became like all about metal, metallic hardcore, death metal, grind, whatever, a little bit of everything. If anyone follows the label, they know it's everything from, like joke bands about Pulling Teeth's drummer to like, I Hate God and the Black Dahlia Murder.
Yeah.
And like, a lot of first records for a lot of bands that are really popular now. So, that started in '04 and kept picking up steam as Pulling Teeth became busier. That was a vehicle to keep A389 getting bigger and bigger, and I always reinvested, I always thought if one of my bands is popular and people help me, I want to do the same thing. So I was able to do with A389 and like a lot of younger bands, give them their first shot at like doing stuff and getting out there. Many of which continue to do really great things, like Full of Hell's like headlining
Right.
now stage now.
I feel like every couple months I'm posting like some fucking co-headlining or headlining tour announcement from them. Like they, in the last like handful of years, they've been one of the busiest bands I think.
They're amazing. Their work ethic is second to none.
Yeah,
and they're like, it's like when I think about like if all those bands were my kids, they're like the kids I'd be the most proud of because they made the most out of it. But again, the Noisem guys like ended up being in Exhumed and in Pig Destroyer, and Travis is playing Cavalera's band now on that tour they're doing for Morbid Visions and Bestial Devastation, which is insane to me, So it was cool to see a lot of bands take that first step with me and continue down the righteous path and still be at it, doing doing what they do their way and evolving way more into what I could have given them, So it was like, I'm proud to be a small step on their story.
I was going to ask, like, what's your most crowning achievement? Is it a Full of Hell record, or is it like a Pulling Teeth record, or?
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of A389 milestones that, like, the Pulling Teeth hologram cover was a huge one because no one has ever done one at that time, and no one has ever done one like that since. That was like, people have done like a lenticular thing. I've seen the NWA one. How do you say it? Evil for Zagan. I'm not saying it the backwards way, but that was the second one that like it's not as good. But they did a lenticular cover for it, and it just kind of wiggles. But that whole moving 2-piece artwork was like the only thing of its kind. And it was like at the time, it was like a $20,000 investment if you put that record out.
Yeah.
Just Pulling Teeth. This wasn't like fucking Metallica, right?
Yeah.
Death Wish wouldn't do it. We were on Death Wish at the time, and it was too big of a risk because, like I said, we weren't like one of their bigger bands. And I was doing the vinyl on A389, and I was like, you know what? If there's one thing that I can say about myself is if I decide I'm going to do something, I'll take it all the way, And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I remember everything from getting Beckman to do the artwork that matches up to like, we had to have a consultation with Apple at the time to like, they had one of their engineers help put that thing together, how it moves the way it does. And I remember launching pre-orders and being like, if this totally flops and nobody buys this shit, I'm going to have to like just work a second job in a warehouse for a year just to fucking pay off the debt.
Yeah.
Took a shot and they sold out like right away, which is fucking great, So that was really cool. as far as packaging, I think it was some of the more innovative packaging. They also had the pop-up center with the rats, which was cool.
I mean,
Like
that's
a
cool.
kid.
That for people who collect vinyl, that's like super cool shit too. You know, and obviously you being someone who, excuse me, runs a label, you would be piped into all that kind of stuff. So all the
It was a
innovation and all the cool things, obviously, like it would make sense that you would be the one to do it.
years of Kiss worship came from
Yeah, yeah,
and also one of the cool things was like at the time nobody was really putting out shoegaze bands on hardcore labels. I don't want to like I'm gonna humble brag for a minute, but we might have been the first because
you
we
started
had
that whole movement, huh?
that and record. It's called Dream Punks. I remember like they sent me a demo and I'm like, this is fucking amazing, but what am I gonna do with this? You know what I mean? And my friend Baron, who was one of my mail order helpers at the time, was like, you should just put it out. And I'm like, you sure? What do you? I mean, I wanted to. It felt like the right thing to do. And I'm like, it's just good music. Good music is good music. And if the label's audience is anything like me, which I always like to think, I'm making records or putting out records for the other me's out there in the world. It's kind of like how I look at it. Then they would understand. They would appreciate it. And it went off great. You know what I mean? That sold multiple pressings. And that led to Nothing coming out of the woodwork and me doing a record with Nothing, who ended up having a really successful career after that.
Yeah.
Being an early step for them was, another huge accomplishment. One thing I wish I did that I tried to do and never got to pull off was I tried to press an Dream Punk's pressing. Remember when you would buy like hockey cards? I don't know where you're from,
Yeah,
but when I
yeah.
was in Canada, so you would buy like a hockey card pack that would have the stick of gum in the middle. And I tried to press the and record on like that gum because it was like that shitty like
Like hard. Well, I mean, like it would
hard
get old
plastic
and
gum,
stale.
right?
Yeah, it would get old and
Yeah,
stale being
so
in there.
they can definitely pull this off. And was in talks with them to do it, and they're like, you know what, it's going to ship and it's going to melt, and you're just going to end up with a bunch of records that you can't do anything with. So that never happened. In hindsight, I kind of wish I did like a smaller, like lathe cut type thing. It would be cool to have an edible record was ultimately the goal.
Mm.
So if someone's listening and they want to take that idea, have at it. Send me one. It
Yeah, I don't
works
know how you
out.
would do that. I mean, on the bubble gum, that'd be fucking wild.
Yeah, it would have to be like that 1980. It would have to legit be that 80s bubble gum.
That's
But
been dried out. Yeah, it's been dried and sitting for decades.
mhm. And then I Hate God was like a holy fuck moment. Black Dahlia Murder was a holy fuck moment. It was like a lot. But Integrity being my favorite band from like the hardcore realm for like the entire time I've been into hardcore, getting to do the Walpurgis Not 7 inch with them, and forging that kinship where Dwight and I did a lot of stuff together after that. Moving forward was really cool. So that's like a really defining moment for me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, as A389 is getting bigger and all the bands are kind of finding success, we had the fest every year. Everyone would come to Baltimore for in January, which was huge. We got Left for Dead to reunite, which was fucking huge. Another great milestone. Getting my hands on that discography and cleaning it up. You know what? I got to jump ahead. Sorry, ADHD moment. The greatest milestone is yet to come because we got the original master tapes for Cold as Life, Declination of Independence.
Nice.
And anyone who's ever heard that record, it came out in 2000, the drums sound like a trash can. The performance is incredible, but like the drums literally sound like Saint Anger. It's like just a weird, clicky, it's a hot mess. And we were able to go in and fix everything. We got Taylor Young to remix it.
Oh, nice. Cool.
It's fantastic. So really excited about that. But anyways, going back.
When does that come out, though? Or do you
Hopefully
know?
at the end of this year. We got Dying Breed is coming up next, the discography for Dying Breed from Troy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Cold as Life Declination. And it's kind of like the last thing on my grid for now. Let's go back to just gardening and shit. I don't know. Figure it out. But as Pulling Teeth and Aether and I were both culminating, I started having children. And that would have been 2010. And anyone that knows, it takes a lot out of you.
Mm-hmm.
I had to quit doing bands and quit doing label stuff and get a real job that provided health insurance for my family, which, wow, for the first time in 2010, that was the first time since like the 90s, I had to get a straight 9 to 5,
Right. Yeah. Bummer. That was
it was an
speaking
adjustment.
of culture shock again.
Oh, it's brutal. You know what I mean? I don't think I had a friend at work. I've been at the same place for like 15 years now. I don't think I made a friend at work until like 10 years into it because I just didn't talk to anybody. I don't want to talk about band stuff with people you work with. You know what I
Right.
mean? They hear shit like if there's a City Paper article on the label or the bands and they want to talk about it and like ask me if I like Nickelback or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm just
that's
like,
the thing. It's like they'll try to relate with you on music, but they're relating on a much more surface level of music, and we're way here at the bottom of the Marianas Trench almost.
I
and
truly
it's like
loathe it.
there's no middle ground here.
I one of the greatest displeasures of life at my age is talking about music. I like honestly loathe it. Like with anybody, if anyone wants, like, I call it talk, really talk. Like let's talk, let's really talk. You know,
Hmm.
and you know they're like chop it up and chew the fat. I'm just like, you know, I don't want to do it. But anyways, so that all culminated, and I wound it down. And A389 came to an end because it was too much. Like I said, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was working like 20 hours a day between the two jobs, sleeping for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and it was just fucking miserable, you know? It was
Hmm.
cool. The accomplishments were great, but I couldn't keep up with it. And ended up kind of like, didn't leave any of my bands hanging. A lot of them went over to Relapse, which started my relationship with Relapse. A couple went to Southern Lord, and others went others, and others broke up, and others did other things. You know what I mean? It was cool. But it was around the time I had booked an Integrity show in 2015, and whoever they had playing lead guitar at the time, this was after the Melnick's reunion. The Melnick's reunion was in 2014. No, it was 2012 because that was the big one. I think. Jeez, I don't know. 2012 or 14. I'm going to have to fact check that. I think it's 14. I'm almost sure it's 14 because that would have been 10 years. Melnick's and Chris Hawthorne were in the band, so it was almost like the original lineup. And they did that as a one-off, and after that, it left with having to find new members. And the guy they had ended up bailing on them like a week before they were going to do the show. And I was like, dude, I know all the songs. I'll play it. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like a no-brainer. I've done
So
that with Ringworm a couple times too. You know, it's like
was
those.
that the intro to the time spent there? Was that the foot in the door moment?
I mean, we talk all the time, so it was really no
Oh yeah,
thing. It's
yeah,
kind
but you know, you
of,
stepping up to go like, ah, fuck it, I'll just do
yeah.
it.
'Cause I've done it with Ringworm a few times, and I was like, you know what? It's like those two bands' catalogs I know like the back of my hand. And we did it, and it was flawless. It was with the Joachim brothers at the time, who were great musicians, so it was very easy to put together. And we did that show, and we did a few other shows, and that kind of evolved into what became the Howling era of Integrity, which started out with me, Joshy from Ilsa, and Dwid doing everything, and then morphing into Francis from Devil Master in the band. I'm sorry, Darkest Prince, and the Sex Man, everybody that came and went, and it was an amazing time. I've been an Integrity fan since the '90s, so seeing and being part of what was one of their more prolific eras as far as putting out music and playing shows, like we took that shit seriously. We like, practiced a lot. We
Yeah.
like always tried to deliver, and like I think it was amazing as a fan. I felt like we did it justice, and it was really cool.
How much of
And
your? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna ask, like, how much of your input do you think, like, your personal and creative input on the record, led to that, time of that time of the band,
I mean the
like the
whole
Howling era, like you were suggesting. You know what I mean? Like you were going.
50-50. It was me, Dwight and I literally we were a team during that era. It was literally we decided everything together, and we spent a lot of grueling hours working on that record. It took a long time. It nearly drove me insane, but it was like it was worth it in the end. It came out awesome, and like we're both two very OCD, um, hyper focused, but on different things. So we would often like it's one day it's peace, one day it's war. And it was real intense, but we were both really happy with the end result, and I think it was a true crossroads of my musical taste and him coming together and like making something new that still sounded like Integrity but wasn't a rehash of the other records. It's
No.
cool. It wasn't like Humanity is the Devil 2, Return of the Devil. It was like something totally different and cool. And we did a lot. We got to go to Japan, we got to go to Australia, and I remember coming back from Australia with Integrity and someone on the flight wearing a mask. I'm like, what's that shit about? You know what I mean? It was just like, little did I know that was like the beginning of
That's
what
your
was
new
about to come.
life. Your new life's
Yeah,
coming, sir.
total foreshadowing. It's crazy. And I came home, and the world collapsed. And I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I wrote a ton of songs. I wrote songs for a ton of bands. I still have like a surplus, a bevy, whatever you want to call it. Tons of songs that I'm going to eventually do if I get around to it. Time getting less and less. But once the world opened up again, and it was time to Integrity do things again, I had gotten divorced during the pandemic
Mm.
and had my three kids a lot of the time. Usually this was a time where, the support system was minimal. So
right.
my life looked totally different. It was just like I did a lot of the stuff like originally, like I always, my kids were always my top priority, and I would shove everything else I had to do in between. But this required a lot more of like being available in case.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was a totally different approach to life.
Right.
It wasn't like someone else has got it covered. I can do this and we'll meet up. It was more just like, fuck, I need to be here all the time now. And touring went out the window. And that's when I just wrote a bunch of songs and then, crossed avenues with Cold as Life, and that kind of picked up. And Integrity picked up on their own. And they got new guys that are fantastic. They sound better than ever. Dwid gets older and his voice sounds better. Like guys they got playing are way better than I am, but it's like it's cool to have been a part of it. And that takes us up to where End Rain starts, That's where the story kind of like one of those Tarantino movies where it goes from the back and comes forward.
Yeah.
Weird books, but yeah.
I want to touch a little bit on a couple questions because we kind of glossed over some stuff with the label, because you had so many like you said, milestones and big bands or bands at the time that would go on to do a lot bigger things. Like, what was the and I'm assuming it was mostly run by you personally. Like, how big was your staff at your biggest peak?
One.
Yeah. So
it was Superior Alex, Alex Shaw, that is now the noise guy in Pig Destroyer.
Hmm.
He was my right hand man for many years. He spent many an all nighter with me packing orders. And I have to mention Baron as well. Baron Kirkpatrick. He plays in a band called War Games, another band called Bleak Shores. A local friend, great dude. A great friend. And like, just these are dudes out that like went above and beyond.
Yeah.
They showed up. I was just happy to be there. Like, no problem. We're pulling an all-nighter in a freezing cold storage unit where we had to like steal electricity from the next building. We'd roll in with like 20 extension cords and set up power bars, and we'd have these, because they call it climate controlled. But as soon as those lights go out and the staff leaves, that shit's dropping to like temperatures, right? No one's there to know. But we're in there and it's like freezing. Like brutal. Like we're in like winter coats and it's still brutal. So we devised this plan to drive back home and get as many extension cords as we can. And run them to the next building and bring all these space heaters in. And I'll never forget, we're like, I think it was Baron. He flew too close to the sun. He's like, let's just turn on one more space heater, and he hit it, and everything
Popped
blew.
Yeah,
we're in total darkness and
cold as shit.
No heat. It was brutal, but these were the guys. These are the guys I surrounded myself with.
And all those people that were getting those records in weeks' time from you packing them would have no idea what you have gone through.
Oh, the blood, sweat, and tears, man. It's a story within itself, for sure.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, those are always funny, like when you look back about, like, because I also have stories where you steal power for one reason or another, so it's just funny. You think back on those times. But my question was going to be, like, at what level does a band get too big for, for you? Like, and as a label owner, someone who's working with bands, is it more like a proud dad moment, or is it kind of like oh shucks, I wish I could, kind of handle this going forward, but obviously I don't have the resources or time, or
It's a great question, and it's a little bit of both. It's always bittersweet, what I mean? It's a little stab in the heart when they move on, but it's also understandable. I think it's like I think about like a Full of Hell, for instance. They're like, there's no way I could have kept up with Full of Hell was becoming,
Mm-hmm.
Full of Hell were like, by the time I did those first two records, and they were already like touring most of the year and just growing and growing. And then I was still in the loop for the Merzabau collab. I did the vinyl for that, and Chris Bruni from Profound Lore, an old friend of mine from Canada, small world in this music world, but he ended up doing the CD, and he took that next tier. He helped them get like established on a somewhat of a middle tier, and then I helped get them onto Relapse when it came around full circle again. So I've always kind of been behind the curtain, helping these guys out, and it's I don't want anything for it. I'm just happy to see my friends succeed, and like guys that I know are really, I could, being a label guy, and like I've been a label guy and a band guy for so long, I could tell you, like, band guys are the worst. They always want something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like, everyone's your friend because they want you to do something, and then when you can't anymore, you're not, like, see you later. But yeah, I just wanted to always make sure that those dudes were like set up and in a good place, because I showed them everything I knew, which was pretty limited, and then it became something where they were showing me stuff because it was like the student had superseded the teacher, you know.
Yeah.
And Noise was another one, but it burned out so quickly. Noise went from like being teenagers. They were playing like the sidebar, which is like this little dingy 100 maximum stuff place, like local death metal bands. They were just like kids. They were in high school, and they like skyrocketed to like touring with Carcass a couple times, being on the cover of Decibel. Shit was going big, big, big.
Yeah.
I mean, it was lightning in a bottle. Like to see them at that time was unbelievable. That first wave, like the Agony Defined era, was untouchable. And honestly, that's another one where I negotiated a contract for them in Relapse too. And by negotiated, I was like, "Hey, do you want to put this out?" I don't want to sound like I'm like this mastermind. It was very just like so how's it going? Like push it, just making sure they're in good hands because I knew.
Right. Is it some? Sorry. Is it something like you don't have the financial resources to like put out the amount of vinyl or the recording, or is it like the marketing? You don't have the ability for the marketing, or
Yeah,
like
the
what
manpower.
is it? Okay, so it's
It was the
manpower stuff.
manpower. The budgeting thing was never an issue because we could sell enough records to cover what needs to get covered, and everyone gets paid. You know what I mean? But it's more like, yeah, how many times do you want to run the 5 mile track when you can do the 10 mile or the 15 or the 50 or the 100? There's no reason to set the ceiling so low and just exist in this little bubble when you can accomplish so much more. And Full of Hell's proof that there's no limit to what you can do, and nothing too. I've seen nothing do insane things, and like, yeah, no. I mean, it's a little bit of a pride sting when you're like, oh, it's like a dad thing too, when you're like, oh, they don't need me anymore. You get
Yeah, yeah.
bummed out about it. But at the end of the day, it's the right decision, and to see them succeed is really satisfying. And to still see those bands. When I see a festival and I see like a Full of Hell or Nothing or still like Top Billers or Integrity is still headlining stuff, it makes me feel good because I had like a small part in keeping that alive.
Yeah.
And those bands mean a lot to me, and their friendships mean a lot to me. So it was never really a business agreement. You know what I mean? It was always more just like a labor of love that like made us all a bit of money and like we're able to keep things going.
Yeah. When you think back, to early days, like, did you ever think like hardcore would be where it's at today? Like what was your like how long did you think hardcore would last from like when you were a young kid? Like how long, like could you see the forecast? Like could you see how long it could be, or did you think it was going to stick around for another 20, 30 years?
I mean, this is I think I have a few different tiers to answer that. I think like first off, I'd like to say that it's a young person's game, 100%.
Yeah.
So the young person has the energy to
Is it a
really
young
give it.
person's game because it's there's no older people yet? I mean, because as the time moves on,
No,
those
no,
younger
that's
kids are going to turn like
I was saving that for the second tier.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think it really flourishes when it's in the young person's possession. When we were young, we were like in that band Dirge I was talking about, and we were like kids growing up in Toronto, like like in high school. None of us had driver's license. We used to like take all of our shit, Marshall's fucking stacks and drum sets, onto the bus into the city, which was like an hour ride onto subway trains to play a show at Gasworks, which you would probably have seen in Wayne's World, the club
Yeah.
we play in Wayne's World. That was in Toronto that we would play at sometimes. But yeah, like so we would literally like have five of our buddies and all of us take all our shit. You couldn't pay me to do that now, right? But like when you're young, you have that hunger, and that's why it's a young person's game. I think like they wanna, they're gonna sleep on people's floors. They're gonna do it. I did it, and I think it's magical. It's a magical period, and
Certainly
at the same time, it keeps it fresh. New people come in, and then there's the other side of the coin, which is like and this is kind of a weird thing because yeah, you can make a career out of it. Many of my friends have, in a weird, bizarre twist of fate. I have too. You can call it that. A feather in my hat. I wouldn't call it a career, but it's like I don't know. I'm glad I can go see Integrity anytime I want, or I can go see Despise You, or I can go see fucking Earth Crisis if I want to, right? But like, it's also like a weird backlash where people used to idolize all the old bands, and now there's like a real wild like ageism thing going on where it's like nobody wants old people like old bands, but all the other people are like, yo, you guys are old, just take
yeah.
a hike. It's
Yeah.
a real weird division.
I think
Not everywhere.
it is the reason I ask is because I feel like, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way in some aspects, but hardcore is on like this very big like TikTok and Instagram and social media, and the younger generation have definitely gotten a hold of hardcore in one form or the other, whether it's through like a band like Turnstile or it's some kind of like mosh content, crowd kill content that they've seen,
Sure.
like the normal audience has seen, and they're like, "What the fuck is this?" So I feel like hardcore is it's a big upswing right now, and
Right.
it's a lot different than when I was a kid.
Those kids aren't going to care that there's an N Rain record, but
Yeah.
it's like at the same time, Turnstile Universe is an amazing place, and it's like I'm glad that that exists, and like it makes me happy. You know what I mean? It's like you leave high school or you leave whatever. Life moves in phases, and when you look back at your era, and it's like it's like those were that was like my time or your time, and now it's like their time. These
Mhm.
young kids, they're having a great time,
And
and like
they're still having beatdown bands and crossover
yeah,
bands and stuff that aren't as big as Turnstile that they're getting turned on to. But like what I'm saying is like Turnstile and the Taco Bell commercial just like sends them down a little rabbit hole. It kind of
it's
nudges them
great.
down there.
Yeah, it makes me really happy for everybody involved. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of extension of just seeing other people. It's like this is the dad part, was like seeing other people's kids do well. So it's just like it's like it's cool. It makes me really happy, and but yeah, it also kind of made like a weird like sub genre to hardcore where it's just like all these older bands all of a sudden have like it exists in a different realm,
Yeah.
and we're like the classic rock of hardcore.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like even like like Hatebreed. I've been able
Hmm.
to like witness Hatebreed from like not an infant stage because I wasn't like an early person to the Hatebreed cult, but I did find them like right before Perseverance and Under the Knife and around that time and stuff like that. And then
Yeah.
of course when Perseverance came out, I was like fully on board. But it's been interesting to see like bands like Hatebreed or like other bands turn into legacy bands over time.
Legacy band is a perfect way to put it. Yeah, and
And
they preserve.
I never thought that I'd be listening to Hatebreed for 20 plus years. You know what I'm saying? Like,
You're right. The
I didn't
longevity,
think about it.
it's wild, but it's like I think a lot of people like you and I, music connects you to a certain part of your life. You know what I mean? And I think that listening to like Hatebreed, throwing the Under Knife 7 inch on for me takes me back to being in the van with Dirge or with Day Morning
Yeah.
with my friends at that time. And it's like I don't want to cheapen it by calling it nostalgia because they're making current music that's great. You know what I mean? And they're fucking hard workers, and they're like they set the bar for so many different things that like
Mm-hmm.
can achieve as a band in this like, little microcosm. But you're right, and it's just weird. It's almost like like I said, it's like the older bands are like the classic rock bands now. You know what I mean? We're the guys in the Led Zeppelin shirt and the Black Sabbath shirt trying to like smoke pot behind the school or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I think me, I think there's room for all of it because I come from a world where it's like I never discover music when it's hot and new. Stuff like the Hatebreed 7 inch like Integrity when I was a kid and it was new, yeah, that worked out. But as I got older, I love finding old stuff that's new to me. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
didn't get into bath till like way after, or like
I'm in that mode right now too. A lot of those bands, because and I've said this many times on this podcast, so I apologize. But you know, early scene days when gatekeeping was still like very prevalent and like a very big part of the scene. I feel like
hmm,
um, it made me not check out a lot of bands, and then as time has gone on, like obviously personal taste changed too. So I started rechecking out bands that I just didn't like back in the day, and then obviously like that opened up a whole different world. But then I started checking out bands that I like was like, oh well, I wasn't like really allowed to like that band, but let me check it out, and oh, that opened up a whole different world. So yeah, it was it's
it's a
kind of fun.
constant discovery. Like a big one for me when I was like a teenager was Fishbone. That was just like opened the door to so much like ska and funk and like other genres that were like foreign to me at the time. I was a heavy metal kid. I like heavy metal and
Mm-hmm.
horror movies, and that was it. And like kind of like bridging me into that, and then like hearing like a band like Anthrax or Metallica that bridges me over to like MOD and DRI, which would bridge me over to Agnostic Front and Biohazard. And it's like it was a constant, and it still is. I mean, I still find stuff I like that's old. Sometimes that's new, but I never find out when it's new and hip. I can never be the tastemaker that's like You know, it's always just like I'm the last guy that's like, hey guys, if you like, you hear this, and like,
Yeah, like 10 years ago, man.
but it's okay. I think there's no rules. Do whatever you want.
No, for sure. No, and again, I think it's awesome that, but I don't know if I agree with like you think that the older bands are kind of in this different category for the younger kids, because I also think like one of the things is like people in bands listen to like I'm sorry, people that listen to these bands when they like listen to band interviews or podcasts or stuff like that, like that is their like album cover or thanks list or whatnot, because all that music is digitally ingested, or
Right.
like so they don't really get the whole like where we had like sat with the CD for a while and flipped through the pages and the album artwork and all this kind of stuff where you see what band shirt he's wearing or what bands were thanked in the thank you liner notes and stuff like that. So I think I think fans of bands listen to like this type of online content, and then they kind of search backwards that way too for what bands are like mentioning their influences are or bands they listen to. And I think a lot of like I honestly think a lot of newer bands listen to a lot of older stuff because I don't know, but I've never really met someone that likes Bolt Thrower, but everyone says they like Bolt Thrower,
I
so
love
like
both stories.
yeah, I but like every new band, like every new younger kid, I'm like, how do you even find Bolt? Like, how do you even find Bolt Thrower? You know what I'm
I pretended to be sick at one of my best friend's weddings so I can go see both Thrower twice.
saying?
When they played Maryland Death Fest, so I managed to get out of there a couple times and catch them. And Integrity
Were
played
you
with
in like your
Memoriam.
full on? Were you in your full on like wedding attire?
Oh no, I got a quick change of clothes. But oh man, and we played with Memoriam in Europe with Integrity once. When I met Carl, I told him that story. He was amused. I was like, I left my best friend's wedding to come see you guys play. And he was just like, whoa.
It's like what the
And
fuck?
but no, it's I agree with you on part of that, but I also feel like, and this is gonna be some old man yelling at cloud shit, but I think society's devolved where the attention's no one's gonna listen to a 3 hour album,
Of course.
watch a 3 hour movie.
Uh huh.
I think like social media and like Instagram and TikTok culture has made everyone's attention span shrink. They want the clip notes,
Yep. I
A
agree
lot
with
of
that.
people are gonna really like absorb everything that music. I think our generation of people that like listen to music and really truly digest every last detail and like leaves you wanting more and like grab another branch off another tree and explore that. I don't want to say it's completely lost because I still meet people that are, refreshingly of that mindset. But I
Right.
think
Right. Right.
like fast food, you know what I mean? I think more people want the instant gratification.
Right. I mean, I
It's
think
like
that there's just more people out there, so there's more people out there doing it. I don't want to say the wrong way, but that way.
it's their way,
Yeah, it's
and
that way.
that's totally cool. There's
But
room
yeah,
for
like you're
everyone.
saying, the attention spans are very short, and I mean, you see it in every asset of all sorts of industries, not just like how can you get someone to listen to a whole record. So
My friend Rich from Wisdom and Chains would tell me, put your best songs at the beginning because no one's ever going to get all the way to the end. And I'm just like, no, fuck that. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
this is my masterpiece. I'm going to lay it out the way I want it. And I
that
think
does suck too, because like and you kind of see, and unfortunately, you do kind of see that in some kind of
he's right.
in
He's
some
100%
albums
right.
layout. Yeah, whereas like the back, yeah, I'm sorry, the front half of the record is like just chock full, but then you get to the back half and it's not as good. Whereas if like you sprinkle that throughout, those
Hmm.
lower, those not as good songs don't stick out as poorly, altogether if they're chopped in between like singles, or if the album track list is
Right.
structured appropriately.
But if you look at like a Spotify, like stats,
Right.
you always see the first songs have like the highest plays, and then it like kind of goes down
Oh
because
yeah,
no one.
drastically. Oh, depending on
But
the record, depending on the record of the band, yes.
yeah, but for the like generally speaking, that's kind of how it goes. But I'm like, I refuse. I always lay out the record and plan it out where it's like a trade secret is I model every record after AC/DC Highway to Hell. I've always have. Listen to every record I've ever been on. It kind of follows the same template as Highway to Hell does. Starts off strong, it kind of like follows the same energy all the way across, and it's something that that's always the standard. I think a perfectly sequenced album such as Highway to Hell is like worth its weight in gold. It's like the biggest one of the best lessons out there is to find an album that like you can listen to start to finish and figure out why it is. Not
It,
necessarily in the songs or the style, but just how it's arranged and like what keeps your interest.
yeah. How big of a influence is Angus on your guitaring? Your love for guitar and playing.
First person I ever. That's why I bought a guitar when I was in sixth grade because of Angus Young. I saw the video for Back in Black and on Much Music at the time, and I was like, I want to do that. And dreamt of getting an SG, dreamt of being able to to play like he does, and I still can't. But I mean, like it's still I got to do some pretty cool stuff. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
all right.
You did okay. You did okay with it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Dom, man, it's been a great it's been a quick hour. It goes by quick.
Wow, I know, right?
Yeah,
Jeez.
it goes by
Usually in
quick.
bed by this
Well, I won't keep you for much longer then.
time. Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate
No
it.
problem, man. Yeah. Best of luck, and you still are doing A389, right? That's still going on. I know
Yeah,
you,
we
you brought
got
it back.
Dying Breed, Take My Soul, Give Me Grave is going to be out when this podcast comes out. You'll be able to, if you love fuck, it's like the best qualities of like Hatebreed and 100 Demons and Marauder,
Nice,
or like a newer band like God's Hate
nice.
is like fucking Dying. I mean, God's Hate named themselves after a Dying Breed song. If that gives you any indication of how
Right.
great Dying Breed is,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
majestic. You know what I mean? And then we got that Cold as Life Declination remix, and beyond that, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. I guess
Cool.
maybe we'll know time the stairs.
Cool.
See.
Yeah, yeah. And don't be so humble. Obviously, you have a thumbprint on this little hardcore lore as the storyline of hardcore. So don't be so humble. You have a little saying and a piece of that. So you've done well for your not. You've done well for yourself. You've done well for the community as well. You've done a lot for other people and other bands, and you should get a little. I'll give you a little flowers now. How about that?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, you're more than welcome. Check out In Rain. Album drops this week. Well, technically this week if you're listening to this, but check it out. Relapse
Sure.
Records. And yeah, man. Well, hopefully we'll see some In Rain soon live, but we'll leave that up to you guys or
If
whatnot.
it
But
happens, it happens,
yeah.
and it'll be really special.
All right, festivals. Get to
I'm not saying
calling.
good, but it'll be special.
Yeah.
All right.
Take it easy, Dom. Have a great night.
Thanks again. Take care.